Tyon Grant-Foster will be in court on Monday afternoon. Will he be on the court for Gonzaga 3 hours later?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and folks, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, lots to cover today. Gonzaga landed its third recruit in the 2026 class for the month of October. They landed Luca Foster, 6'5" wing. We'll talk about that to close out the show. We're also going to get you ready for tonight's exhibition matchup against Western Oregon, a Division II school in the Salem area. We'll talk about what we're expecting to see from Gonzaga in this game. But first, we lead off the show with the latest in an ongoing saga between Tyon Grant-Foster, Gonzaga, and the NCAA. It is good news for Mark Few, Tyon Grant-Foster, and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Not so good news for the NCAA, who has been fighting relentlessly to prevent Tyon Grant-Foster from suiting up for Gonzaga this upcoming season. But that is a fight that I don't want to say they're losing necessarily, but that they took a big counterpunch over the weekend. For those of you who missed this story, Tyon Grant-Foster is currently suing the NCAA. Is pursuing a lawsuit against the governing body because they have denied his eligibility for his eligibility waiver request to play this season for Gonzaga. They've actually denied it 3 times now, basically 4 times now. And after the most recent denial, which came on October 17th, that was when Grant-Foster officially filed his lawsuit against the NCAA. They had a preliminary injunction hearing set to take place on Thursday, October 23rd, the same date as the WCC Media Day. At that preliminary injunction hearing, the plan was that a judge would be presented with all of the information and would make a decision on whether to grant the injunction hearing, in which case Grant-Foster would then become immediately eligible to play for Gonzaga while the lawsuit is ongoing, which almost certainly would have meant that Grant-Foster plays. He plays all season long. He either drops the lawsuit at the end of the season or there's a settlement or whatever. It ends up resulting in Grant-Foster getting what he wants, which is another year to play for college basketball. However, the NCAA, less than 24 hours before that hearing was supposed to take place on Thursday, they filed a motion to instead have it be heard in a federal court. And they cited some legalese that they've never really cited before in any of these cases in an attempt to make this case not be heard in Spokane County. And this felt like a bit of a death blow. Grant-Foster posted a really heartfelt, emotional post on Instagram. He's posting the broken heart emoji. The lawyers said they were continuing to fight, but this really felt like the NCAA had found a way to drop a hammer on this situation and end the fight for good. However, on Friday, October 24th, a judge, Thomas Rice, a federal judge, read over the NCAA's motion and dismissed it and kicked it back to Spokane County. Said there's no reason that this needs to be heard in federal court. These types of cases, these types of court cases have been heard in state courts and county courts before. There's no real reason that this needs to be heard in a federal court. It seems like the NCAA was using this as a stall tactic, and it effectively did not work because it only stalled this case for a couple of days because Grant-Foster's attorneys, once that was kicked back to Spokane County, worked incredibly diligently to make sure this thing got on a docket as soon as possible. Again, this was Friday. Friday afternoon was when we found, or Friday morning, I guess, was when we found out that this thing was getting kicked back to Spokane County, and Grant-Foster's attorneys were able to get a judge to hear this case at 2:30 p.m. on Monday. Got to imagine that's about as soon as it was possible for them to get this thing in front of a judge. That judge, by the way, Marla Polin, is a graduate of the Gonzaga Law School. Obviously, judges are incredibly impartial, and I'm not saying that to indicate that it is a benefit for Gonzaga in any way. It certainly should not be. It is a nice little, we'll say, middle finger to the NCAA that they not only very quickly got another preliminary injunction scheduled, but I think it's probably in the NCAA's craw a little bit that it's going to be presided over by a Gonzaga judge or a Gonzaga graduate who is the judge for this case. But yeah, that's where we're at. Grant-Foster's preliminary injunction hearing will take place on Monday in Spokane County at 2:30. Gonzaga will, of course, play their second exhibition game of the season on Monday at 6 p.m. at the McCarthy Athletic Center, also in Spokane, Washington. There is a non-zero chance that not only will Grant-Foster play for Gonzaga this upcoming season, which a few days ago felt astronomically slim, but he might be able to play in this exhibition game on Monday. Whether Gonzaga actually opts to put him in the game, whether the judge actually comes to a decision within the time frame for that to happen, all of those things are up in the air. There's basically a handful of outcomes. One, the judge ultimately does not grant Grant-Foster the injunction, and then his season is effectively over at that point. If he does not get the preliminary injunction, he is not going to play this year. That's it. It's done. It's over. Or the judge does grant this preliminary injunction and does so quickly within the, an hour or so of the court case court hearing beginning, and Grant-Foster gets over to the kennel and throws on his jersey and plays for Gonzaga in the exhibition game. Or the third option is that it takes longer than a day, basically. The judge does not have to come to a decision on this hearing right then and there. Now, the lawyers for Grant-Foster have indicated that we believe, and this was before the hearing was supposed to be on Thursday, they said, we believe it's possible that a judge will come to a decision on Thursday because we've presented them with a ton of information. We think there's enough data here that a judge should be able to come to a decision quickly. Doesn't mean that they will. And in this case, it could take Judge Poland a day or two or three, in which case Grant-Foster obviously would not get to suit up for Gonzaga in that exhibition game on Monday, but he may get to suit up still in time for the season opener, which is on November 3rd, a week from today, against Texas Southern. The other option, I suppose, would be that that the judge does make a determination on Monday, today, and does grant Grant-Foster this injunction, but that Gonzaga does not play him in the exhibition game, either because the judge doesn't make the decision until like 5 p.m. or because Gonzaga just doesn't want to put that stress on him of turning around and immediately playing in a game. Yes, it's not a game that counts, but that is still a possibility that Grant-Foster is granted the injunction and doesn't play on Monday. I think nobody's going to be too upset about that reality. We don't need to see him in an exhibition game. Just knowing that he's eligible is fantastic. Having said that, I think Gonzaga, if he is eligible, they're going to want to get him out there. It doesn't matter if he looks rough. It doesn't matter if he, is still learning the offense, still learning his teammates. Obviously, all of that is true, because as a reminder, when this ruling came out, from the NCAA, when they officially denied him, he had to stop practicing with the team. That practice waiver that he was granted on October 1st was kind of nullified when the actual decision came down from the NCAA on October 17th. So he's had not even 2 weeks, or basically 2 weeks of practice with this team. So if he does play on Monday, he may look a little rough, but we're just going to be so dang happy that the saga is finally over. And obviously, if the judge does not determine to grant his injunction, then at least the saga will still be over at that point, although we will be devastated for Grant-Foster for having to go through all of this fight to not end up getting to play for Gonzaga. I don't really want to make a firm guess on this situation because of how much it has changed I'm nervous by the time you even hear this, that some of this data is going to be out of date. That's how quickly this story has been moving. I will say that people who study the NCAA, who work in law, either they're lawyers or they work in college athletics and in compliance, a lot of people have spoken out on social media and seem to feel that Gonzaga and Tyon Grant-Foster's odds are pretty good, and that they improved with this latest shenanigans by the NCAA, that effectively the NCAA may have hurt their chances of this injunction getting denied by all of the goofiness of trying to get that federal court to look at this. And I think it feels like that is true, that the NCAA may have hurt themselves. They took a chance trying to delay this thing, seeing if they could kind of make one more step. Why they're fighting it so hard is a bit of a mystery to me. I suppose they had to find a spot to draw their line in the sand. And for some reason, a kid who, as Mark Few famously said a few weeks ago, literally died twice, on the basketball court. That's their line in the sand for whatever reason, but it's the tides have definitely turned at this point in favor of Grant-Foster, but we will know officially once Judge Poland makes her decision after Monday at 2:30 when that hearing takes place. Well, obviously, whether Grant-Foster plays on Monday is the biggest storyline going into this exhibition game against Western Oregon. There's no debate about that. But that doesn't mean it's the only storyline. And we're going to talk about a few other things we're going to be watching for against this Wolves team on Monday night coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, college basketball is back, and I could not be more excited. The madness, the rivalries, the energy in the crowd, there's nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets, it can feel like more of a battle than the game itself, whether there's endless queues or hidden fees or prices jumping at checkout. And that's why I use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices without any of those surprise fees. What you see, that's what you pay. Honestly, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it is less stressful than any other way that I've bought tickets. And I love that you can see the views from your seat in the app. Tickets for Gonzaga versus Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena November 8th. They are now in Section 222. They were $98, then they were $101. Now they're $92. As we say, prices drop the closer you get to tip-off. So $92 a piece right now. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're now getting ready for tonight's exhibition matchup between the Gonzaga Bulldogs and the Western Oregon Wolves, the second and final exhibition game for the Zags before the season begins officially 1 week from today on November 3rd against Texas Southern. Tonight's game will be 6 p.m. on Monday at the McCarthy Athletic Center. It will be broadcast on KHQ locally. So if you are local to the Spokane or Northern Idaho area and you have the ability to watch this game on KHQ, great. Unfortunately, if you are not in that area, this game will not be televised. I ran into that issue last week when Gonzaga played Northwest in the exhibition game. It is available on the radio, on the Varsity app, which is where you're going to be able to find pretty much every Gonzaga game this year on the radio. It's also available locally, 96.1 FM as well. So hopefully those of you out there will be able to find a way to watch this game, even if you're not in the Spokane area, but it is going to be tough. Western Oregon, again, the Division II school in the GNAC, the Greater Northwest Athletic Conference, same conference as Seattle Pacific and Northwest Nazarene and Montana State Billings and a handful of others. Western Washington is in there as well. Lots of local area schools in that conference. They did play Oregon State in an exhibition game on Saturday, the 25th. Oregon State, the Beavers won that game handily. 73-44 was the final score there. Seemed like a good defensive effort. I think Western Oregon only had 16 points at halftime in that game against the Beavers. Again, Division II school, you'd already expect the competition level is not going to be as significant as you'd see from a Division I opponent. But it's also worth noting that Western Oregon isn't even a particularly good Division II school. Rosters obviously turn over year, so we'll see how they look this season, but they went 5-23. Last year, they went 2-16 in the GNAC, so this is just not a team that has had a ton of success based in Monmouth, Oregon, just outside of Salem. But again, we're not expecting this game to be particularly competitive, but that doesn't mean there's not things that we can be looking for. We've already talked the Grant-Foster situation, so I got 5 other things that I will be watching for on Monday night in Spokane. Number 1, will we see Mario Saint-Supery find his groove? Because the numbers from his performance last Sunday against Northwest look pretty good, but the performance was kind of up and down. He ended up finishing with 12 points. He was 4 of 5 from the field. He had 4 rebounds, a steal, and an assist. He also had just 1 turnover in 20 minutes, but he had 3 fouls, all of them in the first half, and it limited how much he was able to play in that first half. And you could see the frustration. He's still adjusting to college officials. And in fact, Mark Few talked about that after the scrimmage. He said, or after the exhibition, he said, he's still adjusting to refs. He's still adjusting to the, not as much rule change as much as just play style differences, like how close you guard, things like that. And this is an adjustment that every European player that has come through Gonzaga's program, and probably every European player who's just come over to college basketball, basketball has gone through. It's not unique. It's not particularly rare or really all that worrisome. That's part of what these exhibition games are for, is so that you kind of iron out some of these things. And for Saint-Supery, it's getting used to how the officials are going to call the game in a lot of ways. This game feels like a great opportunity for him to have his breakout, to really wow people, put a few passes out there that you're just like, oh, wow, I did not know he had that in his bag, or we haven't seen that was in his bag yet. Maybe a couple step back threes or something that just kind of really gets the crowd juiced and excited about what he's going to bring to the team this year. I'm also going to be keeping an eye on how much he plays with Braden Smith versus playing when Braden Smith is benched, because I'm curious how that will play out this season. And one exhibition game is not going to tell us the full story, but it is something I'll be keeping an eye on in this one. Number 2 is Davis Fogle's performance. Can he keep it up? Davis Fogle was outstanding for Gonzaga against Northwest last week. 18 points to lead the team. Yes, most of it was in the second half when that game was well in hand for Gonzaga, but he still looked fantastic. 3 dunks in that game out in transition. He's running constantly up and down the floor, loves to push the pace, loves to get out in transition. He also had a pair of mid-range jump shots that he knocked down very effortlessly as well. He looked great. Very confident player. Love his confidence offensively in particular. In fact, Braden Huff talked about this at the WCC Media Day with me. If you listen to the Friday show, he mentioned it about 12 or so minutes into the show. And he basically said, yeah, I didn't have that kind of confidence when I was a true freshman. And to see Davis have that kind of confidence and believe in himself and believe in his offensive scoring ability is tremendous. So that's something we're going to continue to see that from Davis. And his playing time in this exhibition and his playing time throughout the season will obviously be determined largely based on Tyon Grant-Foster's eligibility, but he's going to get run in this game either way. And I'm curious to see if he can look like that confident, incredibly active offensive player again for Gonzaga. Key number 3, staying out on the wing. Is Emmanuel Innocente healthy? And how does he play? Because we did not see Innocente in the exhibition game against Northwest. The only player we didn't see outside of Grant-Foster, because he was nursing an injury that he suffered towards the end of Craziness in the Kennel, the exhibition scrimmage back on October 4th. As of this recording, we don't have an update on whether Innocente is going to play in this game or not. Obviously, if he does play, that's a very good sign for his status going into the season opener a week from today. If he does not play, I expect that Mark Few or somebody will address that after the game. When they do a post-game press conference, we'll get an insight into, is he expected to be out for the season opener? What's the status? Obviously, I would rather Gonzaga be careful, especially with a player who they don't need to see in an exhibition game as much because they know what he brings to this team. They saw him last year. So if there's any reason to hold him out, I think they should hold him out. It would be unfortunate to not get to see him in this game, but I would much rather that than the risk of him further hurting himself. So we'll see if he ends up playing. And if he does play, I'm curious to see what he looks like, what role he plays. Does he play alongside Adam Miller? Does he play alongside like Steele Venters? Like, is he playing the 2 or the 3? It'll be interesting to see kind of how he's deployed in this game. Key number 4, also kind of sticking on the wing. What does Jalen Worley's role look like? Because up to this point, Jalen Worley has pretty much played the 4. He has been the backup power forward to Braden Huff. And we saw Parker Jefferson played very little at Craziness in the Kennel. He played half as many minutes in the exhibition game as Noah Holland, who is a walk-on on this team. So it feels like Parker Jefferson is likely ticketed for a redshirt season. That's not guaranteed, but it definitely is trending in that direction. To me, that means that Jalen Worley is this team's backup 4. That you have Braden Huff, Graham Ike, Ismaila Diani, and Jalen Worley as your front court rotation. Obviously, again, the Grant-Foster situation potentially changes that. If Grant-Foster plays, I would expect Worley is playing primarily at the 4. Whereas if Grant-Foster does not play, maybe Worley ends up kind of splitting his minutes a little bit more. But I'm really interested to see how Gonzaga continues to deploy him and his versatility this upcoming season. And then number 5, always a key for these exhibition games and a lot of the bye games in the non-conference slate. A chance to see the walk-ons, a chance to see the players who are not part of Gonzaga's rotation. So in this case, it's the walk-ons and potentially Parker Jefferson. Again, we mentioned Jefferson already. He played 5 minutes against Northwest when Noah Holland played 11 minutes in that exhibition game. Jefferson played the fewest minutes of any scholarship player in the Craziness in the Kennel as well. So I'm curious to see, does that happen again? Does Holland play more than Jefferson in this exhibition game against Western Oregon? Does Jefferson play more? Does he get like finally get a bigger role that we haven't seen from him up to this point? My gut says probably not. The closer you get to the season, the more likely you are to play the players that you expect to be big parts of the team. So my guess is that we see not a ton of Jefferson in this game, but how much do we see of Holland? How much do we see of Kate Orness or Joaquin Reyes Moore or Alonzo Metz, the new, one of the new walk-ons on this team? Again, it's just fun to see these guys. I'm not sure how much impact they're going to have on the team this year. It would be a surprise to see a walk-on have an impact. It doesn't happen very often, and none of these players are kind of projected to do so, but it's fun to get a chance to see them play, and exhibition games like this are when that opportunity is the best for those particular players. Well, folks, there was not only good news about Tyon Grant-Foster's status this weekend, there was good news on the recruiting trail as well. Four-star wing Luca Foster became Gonzaga's third and highest rated commitment in the 2026 class, all which have happened in the month of October. We got more on Foster's game, what it means for Gonzaga, coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. They got odds for Gonzaga as well. Gonzaga's national championship odds remain steady at plus 3,500. If you haven't gotten those down, then what are you waiting for? FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, closing out this Monday show, the final Monday show before real counting in the standings basketball is played for Gonzaga. We're talking recruiting here, as it has been a busy month of October for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs, particularly with regards to the 2026 recruiting class. On October 1st, they landed very unexpectedly a 6'5" guard from Germany in Jack Cahill. And then a few weeks later, not as surprisingly, they landed Sam Funches, who had been a long-time target of Mark Few and the Zags. He's a 7-foot center from Mississippi. They landed him on October 17th. And now, about a week after his official visit, Luca Foster, 6'5" wing from Pennsylvania, has committed to the Zags. This happened on Saturday, October 25th. He is again from Pennsylvania, but he's playing this upcoming season at Link Academy in Branson, Missouri, which is one of the better basketball high schools in all of high school basketball. Chose the Zags over a top 9. And Foster was, while Funches was somebody that we had been hearing about for well over a year, that was at Craziness in the Kennel to a raucous chance of We Want Funches, who really felt like somebody that was going to commit to Gonzaga. We felt confident about Sam Funches for months and months. Cahill came completely out of nowhere. Foster's a little bit more in the middle, but ultimately was still somebody that popped pretty late onto Gonzaga's radar. He revealed his top 9 in like late July, and it had Gonzaga on the list. But at that time, we hadn't really heard anything about Luca Foster. There hadn't been a ton of rumblings about him. He hadn't scheduled a visit, anything of that nature. In fact, when he visited for Gonzaga's exhibition game against Northwest on October 19th, he had already visited every other one of the schools on his list. And I mentioned at the time that being the last school to get somebody on campus is often an advantage. And it certainly seems like it played out that way here. But again, at the time, considering that Foster didn't even list Gonzaga as one of his schools until he'd already seen some of these campuses more than once, it definitely felt like Gonzaga jumped in at the last minute and was going to have an uphill battle to ultimately win this recruiting. And they did. They did. Foster commits less than a week after that official visit. Again, We Want Foster chant. We're rocking out at the Kennel for that win over Northwest. And his top 9, again, this is a pretty intense group of schools that Gonzaga beat out here. Villanova, Virginia, Michigan, Georgetown, Oregon, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and his hometown team, the Panthers of Pittsburgh. Lots of good schools, lots of all power conference programs. All programs that have either a ton of money or a rich basketball history or both. And Gonzaga won this recruitment. And Luca Foster, like I said, the highest ranked player in Gonzaga's recruiting class. He's a 4-star wing. He is 40th in the class, according to 247 Sports. Sam Funches is 84th. Jack Cahill does not have a ranking because they don't usually rank international players, but he is also a 4-star, so similar ranking for all 3 of those guys. In that case, Foster is 37th at On3/Rivals. He's also 37th at ESPN. So very consensus kind of rankings on Luca Foster as a top 40, borderline top 40 recruit in the 2026 class. And what Luca Foster does really well all coincides on the offensive end of the floor. Foster is one of, if not the best, pure outside shooter and pure scorer in the 2026 class. This dude shot 37% from three on over 5 attempts per game while playing in the AAU summer circuit this year. Really, really good outside shooter. He's been efficient on two-pointers as well, over 60% on twos, close to 40% from three. He's developing his ability to get to the rim, to draw contact, to get to the free throw line where he shoots well over 80%. When the ball leaves Luca Foster's hands, it's going in the net more often than not. He is a very, very deft and skilled scorer who just has a knack for putting the ball in the net. He is going to fit really well in Gonzaga's offense. He's jittery. He loves to move. He's constantly in motion. And in Gonzaga's continuous motion offense, where everybody's moving, where there's a lot of ball screens at the top of the key, a lot of opportunities to attack off the dribble, a lot of gravity from the big men that gives you open looks from distance, there is a ton to like about what we know about Luca Foster's game already, what we can see him potentially developing into, and what Gonzaga likes to do on that end of the floor. All of the defensive stuff is a bit more of a question mark, but he has the positional size and the versatility and just physicality to be somebody who could develop into a good defensive player. Most freshmen aren't very good defensive players anyway, so get him in a college weight room, get him on the weight plan, get Coach TK to be working with him for a year, and I think we'll see some natural improvement in that area. But make no mistake, Luca Foster is on this Gonzaga roster to put the ball in the net, and he's going to be darn good at it. Joins a very good recruiting class. Gonzaga had the plan all along. They were pretty clear with what they wanted. They wanted at least a 3-player recruiting class in 2026. They wanted a big, they wanted a guard, they wanted a wing. On September 30th, we were starting to get nervous. Gonzaga hadn't landed anybody. At that time, they had already brought Ethan Harris, a wing from Camas, Washington, onto campus, and then he picked Iowa. They were supposed to bring Hurley Brutus onto campus alongside Sam Funches, a wing from Florida. He canceled that visit and committed to LSU. Anthony Felici was scheduled to come to campus November 3rd. He canceled that visit and has yet to commit, but canceled that visit. It was starting to feel a little dire for Gonzaga. And now here we are about a month later, and Gonzaga has their guys. They have their guard, they have their wing, they have their center. And it's clear why they wanted to get a player at each of these positions, because they're going to replace somebody on the roster who is departing after this season. And I'm not saying they're going to replace them productivity-wise, but they're going to replace them in the sense that Gonzaga is going to lose a big. Graham Ike is out of eligibility after this year. He will be gone. He is not coming back. The expectation, of course, until proven otherwise, is that Braden Huff and Ismaila Diani are both going to come back. Parker Jefferson going to come back. So you need another big. Sam Funches slides into that spot again. Everybody kind of just bumps up in the rotation. I think the expectation is that Huff is the guy. Diani starts at the 5. Jefferson takes on a bigger role, and Funches as well. And then you have Cahill, a 6'5" guard. He can play on or off the ball. He's effectively replacing Adam Miller, who is out of eligibility after this season as well. I think the likely situation for Gonzaga is that they would potentially start Braden Smith and Mario Saint-Supery, assuming he comes back in that 26-27 season, and Cahill would be kind of a multifaceted guard coming off the bench. But they'll need to replace Adam Miller, and Cahill seems like the likely candidate to do so. And then on the wing, Tyon Grant-Foster is either going to play this year or not. Either way, this is it for him. This is it for him either way. He's not going to be on the roster in the 26-27 season. Neither is Jalen Worley. Both those guys are out of eligibility after this year. So you need to add some enforcement on the wing, and that's what you get in Luca Foster. He's more of an offensive player, so he's more like, in terms of play style, he's more replacing Grant-Foster than Worley. He's kind of more like Steele Venters, I think, in some ways. Venters, I'm curious what his eligibility will look like after this year. He should, in theory, get another year of eligibility, but he will have been in college for more than 5 years, and the NCAA is not going to be thrilled about giving a player an eligibility waiver if they don't have to, especially somebody from Gonzaga. So that's a bridge that we'll cross when we get there. But if Steele Venters is able to come back, that would put less pressure on Foster to have to contribute right away. But even still, you're still going to have Innocente. You're still going to have Davis Fogle, who's going to step into a much bigger role. Obviously, you're still going to have the transfer portal as an option as well. But Gonzaga wanted to get a wing. and they went out and got their guy in Luca Foster, who joins this class with Funches, with Cahill. We can have a longer conversation at another time about what this means for Gonzaga, the fact that they were able to land 3 recruits in such a short period of time. I think that there is obviously some benefit in the fact that this is the first class that will join Gonzaga when they're members of the Pac-12 conference, and you can sell them on, hey, we're going to be playing San Diego State and Boise State and Utah State and Colorado State. We're going to have 16 non-conference games, and we're going to be playing all sorts of great teams and all that stuff. But also for Gonzaga, money. They know vaguely, we don't know the exact media deal, but they have a sense of how much money they're going to have to spend on their roster in 2026. A lot of other teams don't know that exactly. They're still working with their administration and their NIL budgets. Their football team wants $15 million. Their women's basketball team wants $2 million. They want $8 million. They're only going to get $4 million. They don't, like those kind of conversations are happening, and they're figuring out how can we, use other avenues legally or illegally to get our players paid through the NIL Go system or various other avenues. That's what other teams are trying to figure out. Gonzaga knows they're going to get somewhere between $8 to $11 million in their media rights deal, and they're going to spend the vast majority of that on men's basketball. So Mark Few can promise Luca Foster and some of these guys some money that maybe the other coaches can't. And I don't know if that's a distinct reason that they landed Luca Foster or Funches or Cahill, but you can bet it played a role. It should play a role. Money always matters. It may not be the most important thing, but it matters. If Georgetown, I'll just use them as an example because they're the first one I saw in my notes. If Georgetown really wanted Luca Foster, but offered him half as much money as Gonzaga, you got to make your decision based on that. And so I think Gonzaga's in an advantageous position right now where they have more clarity about their finances. Still not a ton of clarity, mind you, but more. And they're jumping into a bigger conference, and they're utilizing those things to bring in what looks like a very, very strong and compelling and exciting recruiting class in the 2026-27 season. And they may not be done. I suspect Cameron Holmes, who's set to visit November 8th for Gonzaga's game against Oklahoma at the Spokane Arena, I wouldn't be stunned if that visit ends up getting canceled, either by Holmes or by Gonzaga, because they got the guy they wanted in Luca Foster. But they also may still pursue him, and they may still feel confident that they can make him an offer that is competitive with the other schools on his list, which includes Arizona and North Carolina and Oklahoma and Illinois and a few others as well. So keep an eye out. This class may not be done. Holmes, 4-star player, number 30th ranked player in the class. So he not only would be their 4th edition in that recruiting class, he would end up replacing Foster as their highest ranked player in that class. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. I will be going live tonight after Gonzaga's exhibition game against Western Oregon, so 8:15 p.m. or so Pacific time. So definitely check that out if you are watching on YouTube. If not, you'll find it on audio platforms after the game as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, and especially on game day, go Zags.